A few days back, Chris Christie was at the Reagan Library, which obviously has decided the Reagan Library is the Gerald Ford Library because they're bringing through all these rhinos now. Ben Sasse, who's a Trump hater of long standing, apparently he's going to speak next year. I don't think Ronald Reagan could stomach this, but he's obviously not with us anymore. But I worked closely in the 76 and 80 campaigns and in the Reagan administration. I know somewhat of what the Reagan family would be thinking, because notice the two Reagans are gone, and now the doors are thrown open to the Bushies, to the rhinos, and so forth. And I would just say this: Chris Christie went on an attack against the crazies and others who do not believe the 2020 election was legitimate. And I will repeat what I said on radio. I am prepared to debate Chris Christie with respect to one state in particular that I know a lot about, Pennsylvania, my home state. And I challenge Chris Christie and Paul Ryan and all the rest of them. I'll debate them all at the same time. Doesn't matter to me. The issues that were raised in Pennsylvania had nothing to do with voting machines, had nothing to do with ballots per se, had everything to do with the federal Constitution. Do you believe the state legislatures get to decide what the law is when it comes to the picking of electors? Or 5 rogue justices on a 7-member state Supreme Court who get to make that decision? I actually have Supreme Court precedent behind me. In 2000, maybe this president, George Bush, recalls Bush versus Gore, where he litigated and litigated and litigated. And he should have, because Gore was trying to steal the election. It was very, very close. But the Supreme Court of the United States finally stepped in against the rogue Florida court. The Florida court was made up of overwhelming numbers of justices who'd been appointed by a Democrat and who were rather leftist, and clearly Democrat. Even the Chief Justice of the Florida Supreme Court, a Democrat, warned his fellow justices that they were really in very, very dangerous territory. They kept changing the election rules in order to try and help Gore. Finally, the U.S. Supreme Court stepped in, you may recall, and said, that's enough. That's enough. And one of the arguments the state had been making, and the state legislature had been making, was under the federal Constitution, we get to decide these issues. That court in Florida can't keep extending deadlines, can't keep changing the standard by which we count these chads and so forth. And ultimately, the Supreme Court agreed that enough was enough. Well, in Pennsylvania, the Supreme Court there changed the voting rules. You didn't need a signature requirement. They extended voting time, and they made other substantive changes that were intended to help Joe Biden and the Democrats. That case was brought. They were sued. It went all the way to the Supreme Court of the United States. Justice Alito, the justice overseeing that particular region or jurisdiction of the Supreme Court, told them to keep track of the ballots because he thought it was a legitimate concern. Apparently, he could only get Clarence Thomas and perhaps Gorsuch to go along. They couldn't get a fourth. Coney wouldn't go along, Kavanaugh wouldn't go along, and Hollywood John wouldn't go along, the Chief Justice. That's why Chief Justice mattered. We had Rehnquist in 2000 and Roberts now. That's not a crazy case. That's not an illegitimate case. That's a perfectly legitimate case. And because the United States Supreme Court refused to take up that case and stop these lower courts and others from changing election laws that contradict or defy what their state legislatures had done, now Pandora's box is wide open. The Supreme Court had slammed it shut in 2000. This court left it open in the 2020 election. There was also another very important legitimate case that had been brought in Pennsylvania, that the legislature actually violated the state constitution when it changed election laws. Unlike California, where you can change the Constitution very, very easily, in Pennsylvania, it's extremely difficult. It's the second oldest state. It's got a very old Constitution. And there's 3 layers of steps you need to take. Well, they took none of those layers. And they basically changed the voting requirements to make it easier for people to vote by mail and these drop-off voting ballots. It didn't go through the amendment process. And so that was challenged. That was challenged, and a common pleas court judge, she was very courageous, placed an injunction on the counting of the electors for the Electoral College. saying that they had a substantive argument that is likely to win on the merits. And you know what the state Supreme Court did? First time in my memory. It reached down into that court, took the case from that judge, just took it immediately within 48 hours from that judge, issued a 4 or 5 page opinion saying, essentially, now this is over. It's done. There's no legitimate cause of action. This case wasn't raised in a timely manner and so forth and so on, and killed it. So there was a judge who was willing to hear the case, a real judge who thought that on the merits, the plaintiff should have won. The complainant should have won. Those are 2 cases in Pennsylvania. And so I'm happy to debate them with any of the never-Trumpers who use the occasion of 2020 to attack all the Trump supporters and President Trump. But they're gutless. They won't do it. Instead, they go to the Reagan Library. And by the way, I'm told Chris Christie, I have friends that go to these speeches all the time, had 300 people in the audience. We had what, Mr. Producer, 1,500, give or take? 300? The guy wants to run for president. What a loser.
Want to see more? Sign up for LevinTV.